The galaxy's oldest warlords had carved empires across 1,000 star systems, leaving behind smoldering ruins of civilizations that dared resist. To them, Earth was another insignificant blue world, a planet of fragile bipeds clinging to outdated notions of courage and warfare. Their fleets hung in orbit like dark metal storms, weapons humming with quiet confidence. They saw humanity's defensive measures, missiles, armored vehicles, fighter craft, and scoffed. Primitive projectiles, crude combustion, lines of soldiers in body armor. It was comedy to them, the way insects waving sticks might believe themselves an army. The warlords were predators born into conquest. For generations they had perfected battle not only through weapons but through spectacle. Entire species were reduced to entertainment in arenas where champions were forced to fight. Victory meant temporary survival, defeat meant extinction. Such rituals became more than amusement. They were a way to measure strength, to establish the hierarchy of the galaxy. Every new world had its turn. And now, humanity's moment arrived. The declaration was simple. The Alien Council demanded Earth provide its strongest warrior. A single duel would decide the fate of nations. They believed the match already settled before it began. Humanity would throw forward some armored soldier, perhaps clad in exoskeleton technology, wielding clumsy firearms that could not pierce the warlord's shields. The galaxy would laugh as the human was torn apart before billions of witnesses. Earth would kneel, broken in spirit as well as body. The warlords laughed even before the duel was announced. They remembered the first intercepts of Earth's transmissions, films of human soldiers marching with rifles, armored vehicles grinding across mud, and aerial dogfights where fragile planes spat bullets and arcs. Compared to gravitic cannons and plasma forges, these images were laughable relics. To the warlords, humanity was not a race of fighters but a collection of deluded primates pretending at war. They imagined a duel so brief it would hardly count as spectacle. Their amusement was tinged with cruelty. In the council chambers, heavy with the scent of metallic incense, the chieftains jested about what Earth might send. Would it be one of their so-called special forces? A hulking figure wrapped in Kevlar and ceramic, holding a weapon that required both hands to fire? Would it be one of their celebrated athletes, thinking that agility and muscle could stand against centuries of engineered warriors? They speculated, and each suggestion drew roars of guttural laughter. What they did not consider, what they never imagined, was that humanity might answer differently. They judged us only by weapons, never by spirit. They measured only the edge of steel, never the will behind it. Their arrogance was absolute. Across the Empire, broadcasts prepared alien citizens for the spectacle. Billions tuned in, eager for the humiliation of yet another primitive world. Children carved figurines of their champion, a towering behemoth bred in laboratories for combat. Commentators rehearsed the derision they would heap on Earth. For the warlords, this was not a duel of equals. It was ritual theater designed to reaffirm their supremacy. Still, despite their certainty, there was something lingering beneath the mockery. History whispered of exceptions, of species underestimated only to bleed their conquerors. The warlords dismissed such tales as anomalies, but a faint unease hung in the back of their minds. No empire of conquest survives without ghosts. Yet arrogance drowned hesitation. Human envoys stood silent in the alien hall, staring up at the monstrous figures who had issued the demand. They heard laughter echo through the chamber, laughter directed at an entire species. "Bring us your best," the council boomed. "Let us witness the extent of your courage. Choose your champion. If your kind possesses such a thing." The declaration resounded like the tolling of a funeral bell. And still the aliens grinned, their fanged mouths curling wide. To them this was already won, a foregone conclusion. They had conquered worlds of beasts with claws sharper than swords, of telepaths who could twist thought itself, of machines that calculated every angle of battle. What could fragile humans add to that record but another jest? Their histories spoke of knights, warriors, samurai, soldiers. To the warlords, all of it was dust, quaint pageantry long since irrelevant. In orbit, fleets repositioned for optimal broadcast coverage. The duel would be transmitted live across the stars, a performance watched by countless species. For the warlords it was both punishment and warning. See what happens to those who dream of resistance. They laughed as they prepared their champion, feeding it stimulants, sharpening its claws, adjusting its plasma shield. It would be another spectacle, another lesson carved into the galaxy. What they never considered, what arrogance blinded them from seeing, was that humanity's answer would not be measured in weapons alone. Our species carried something deeper, something that could not be calculated by technology or dismissed as relic. When humanity finally stepped forward with its choice, the warlords would learn that the measure of combat was not steel, not claws, not plasma. It was resolve. And in their laughter they had already sown the seeds of their silence. Humanity's council of leaders sat in chambers heavy with silence. The ultimatum from above was absolute: send forth a single champion or watch Earth burn. Generals spoke first, their instinct pointing to the tools of modern war. They argued for soldiers clad in advanced body armor, wielding rifles capable of piercing steel at range. Others pushed for technology, suggesting experimental exocets or drones controlled by the sharpest human minds. Every voice sought to match steel with steel, machine with machine, as though humanity could outdo the galaxy's conquerors in their own domain. But amid the clash of proposals, an older voice rose, calm yet commanding. It belonged not to a soldier of the present, but a scholar of the past. He reminded the council that the aliens demanded a duel, not an exhibition of machinery. Technology could falter, circuits could fail, but the duel demanded something older than plasma fire. He spoke of the warrior spirit, of traditions forged long before humanity split the atom. It was not the gun that mattered but the hands that held it, the mind that guided it, the will that refused to yield. From this quiet insistence emerged the answer: a samurai. The word alone carried weight. It was not a suggestion rooted in fantasy, but in history. The samurai were not relics. They were proof that discipline, honor, and an unshakable code could elevate a warrior beyond the reach of simple weapons. The council argued. Some dismissed the notion as absurd. What could lacquered armor and a curved sword achieve against a beast wrapped in alien shields? Yet the idea refused to die. It was not about matching their technology. It was about presenting the essence of humanity distilled into flesh, steel, and spirit. The chosen warrior was not plucked from ceremonial roles or historical reenactments. He was one who had walked the hard path of mastery, devoting his life to an art few still practiced in its entirety. He lived in obscurity, known only in circles that revered the old traditions, where katanas were not decorations but extensions of the soul. When called, he did not hesitate. He understood the weight placed upon his shoulders, the lives of billions resting on his discipline. No words of bravado passed his lips, only a silent nod of acceptance. Preparation began in deliberate ritual. Armor that had not seen war in centuries was brought forth from sacred care, its plates polished until they gleamed like night water. Every piece was not merely protective but symbolic. The kabuto helm spoke of vigilance, the menpou mask of resolve, the ducuirass of steadfast endurance. His sword, a blade folded thousands of times, carried the spirit of artisans who had long since returned to dust, yet whose legacy endured through tempered steel. While the galaxy mocked, Earth answered with history made flesh. When the warrior donned his armor, silence filled the chamber. Those who doubted felt their arguments collapse under the weight of presence alone. This was no museum piece, no actor in costume. It was the embodiment of human endurance across centuries of strife. His every movement spoke of discipline refined by generations. Each step was measured, each breath controlled, his body a vessel of traditions too deep for alien minds to fathom. The warlords, watching from orbit, howled with laughter when they saw him. Their broadcasts amplified jeers across the stars. A man clad in plates of metal, carrying a blade barely longer than his arm. This was the best Earth could muster? Commentators compared him to the primitive warriors crushed on distant worlds. They expected a duel as brief as a single swing from their genetically perfected gladiator. To them, it was already over before it began. Yet the humans watching felt something different stir. The sight of the samurai was not comedy but defiance. His presence summoned echoes of countless ancestors who had stood against impossible odds. He represented not one nation or one culture but the collective spirit of humankind's will to endure. Where the aliens saw a relic, humanity saw continuity, the unbroken thread of defiance stretching back through every war, every rebellion, every moment where the fragile stood tall against the mighty. The samurai himself betrayed no concern for the mockery surrounding him. His focus was inward, unshaken by alien laughter, untouched by fear of failure. In his mind there was only the duel to come, the movements practiced endlessly, the rhythm of combat etched into muscle and bone. He carried with him not just his own resolve, but the weight of those who had lived and died by the same code. His purpose was not survival, it was to embody humanity's essence before the galaxy. Thus humanity's answer was given. Not a machine, not a weapon of mass destruction, not a soldier clad in synthetic armor. A man, in full samurai regalia, wielding nothing but discipline, history, and an unyielding will. The aliens mistook it for weakness, but humanity knew otherwise. The coming clash would not be about technology. It would be a trial of spirit, and the samurai's steps into destiny had already begun. The galaxy's audience expected a swift execution. Their champion was bred for slaughter, a towering brute armored with energy fields that shimmered like molten glass. Its body carried the marks of genetic manipulation, muscles layered beyond natural design, claws sharper than industrial blades. The creature exuded confidence, a predator certain of its kill. Against it stood a solitary figure in layered armor, sword sheathed at his side, motionless but steady. The contrast alone fueled endless laughter from the watching masses. The opening charge came as a spectacle of fury. The alien champion lunged with speed disproportionate to its bulk, claws arcing down with enough force to tear through concrete. But the samurai was not where the blow fell. His sidestep was precise, measured by fractions, the blade unsheathing in a whisper of steel. A shallow cut opened across alien flesh where no shield was calibrated to defend. The galaxy gasped in unison, not from admiration but disbelief that a strike had landed at all. The champion roared, plasma weapons igniting along its arms, spewing radiant bursts. Again, the samurai moved with impossible timing, each motion the product of years of honed reflex. His armor bore scorch marks, but he flowed like water through the storm, conserving energy, refusing wasteful movements. Every swing of the alien's weaponry left openings that the samurai exploited, slashes at joints, stabs at vulnerable tissue. The blade did not shatter shields, it slipped past them, guided with precision where technology could not anticipate the angles of an ancient art. Alien spectators leaned forward, confusion twisting into unease. The duel was not unfolding as expected. The champion fought with overwhelming power but no discipline, relying on brute strength and technological superiority. The samurai fought with economy, every strike carrying intention, each step placed as though rehearsed countless times. Where the alien swung wildly, the human answered with stillness followed by sudden bursts of decisive action. The duel became not a contest of strength, but of mastery. Moments stretched like ages. The alien bled from a dozen wounds, its fury rising with each injury. It tried to crush its opponent with sheer force, slamming fists into the ground, tearing gouges into the arena floor. The samurai never faltered. He redirected momentum, turning the champion's rage against it. When claws struck, he was already beyond their reach. When plasma flared, he was in the shadow of its arc. Each evasion was closer than breath, yet perfectly timed. The alien warlords who once laughed now leaned in silence. Their champion, bred for destruction, was unraveling before a warrior with no enhancements, no alien science, nothing but steel and discipline. What they failed to comprehend was that the samurai did not fight for entertainment. He fought with purpose, with a code binding every movement. His strike was not driven by rage or spectacle, but by clarity of intent, to win or to die without dishonor. That single truth made him untouchable to a creature bred only to kill without thought. At last, exhaustion betrayed the alien champion. Its movements slowed, the weight of its own fury dragging against its limbs. The samurai remained steady, breathing controlled, conserving strength for the inevitable moment. The final exchange was not a clash of equals but the culmination of inevitability. A single feint drew the alien's guard wide, and the blade flashed upward in a decisive arc. Shields parted as though they were air, flesh yielded with finality, and the champion fell with a roar that echoed into silence. Billions across the stars sat mute. The laughter that had once filled the broadcast collapsed into stunned disbelief. A human armed with nothing but an ancient weapon had felled a monster engineered by conquest. The warlords themselves could not hide their unease. Their ritual spectacle, meant to humiliate, had instead revealed a truth they had long denied, that strength was not born solely of flesh or technology, but of discipline and spirit. The samurai stood unmoving, blade lowered, armor battered but unbroken. He neither celebrated nor mocked his fallen foe. His victory was not for spectacle but for survival, for the unyielding principle that humanity would not bow. In that silence, the galaxy learned the cost of underestimation. The duel was over, but its meaning had only begun to spread. The silence that followed the champion's fall was heavier than any roar of triumph. In the Warlords' council chambers, the air thickened with disbelief. Their creature had been designed to dominate, a living weapon forged with the finest science their empire commanded. It was bred for speed, resilience, and cruelty, and yet it lay defeated by a human who carried no augmentation, no energy field, no alien craft of war. Only steel, resolve, and a discipline that had outlasted centuries. The warlords struggled to comprehend what their eyes had witnessed. Analysts were summoned instantly, their minds desperate to explain away the humiliation. They dissected the duel frame by frame, searching for hidden technology, tricks, or interference. None existed. The samurai's strikes were made by muscle and will alone, guided not by enhancements but by training invisible to the uninitiated. Their reports offered no comfort. There had been no anomaly, no deception. Humanity had simply prevailed through mastery. The weight of this truth spread like a crack through the Empire's confidence. For centuries, their dominion had thrived on the assumption that superiority was measured in armaments and engineered biology. They had believed that raw might was the only true standard of power. Yet here stood a human who disproved their philosophy in front of billions. If one could defeat their champion, then others might rise with equal spirit. The thought unsettled them more than the defeat itself. Among the council, whispers began to coil. They remembered fragments of history, stories buried under layers of propaganda. There had been times when species they mocked as weak had resisted longer than expected. Entire campaigns dragged into years of attrition because those species possessed something beyond weapons. The warlords had dismissed these as inconvenient anomalies, but the samurai's victory resurrected those shadows. A terrible realization grew. Perhaps humanity was not an exception but an embodiment of a truth they had ignored. The alien citizens who watched the broadcast began to question as well. What had been staged as mockery became legend in the making. Across conquered worlds, whispers rose among the oppressed. If humanity could humble the warlord's champion, perhaps resistance was not futile. Perhaps defiance still mattered. For the first time in generations, the spectacle designed to reinforce fear sparked something opposite: hope. Inside the council, anger warred with fear. Some demanded retaliation, the destruction of Earth without delay, an annihilation so complete that no trace of humanity would remain to inspire rebellion. But others, for the first time, counseled hesitation. To destroy humanity now would not erase what billions had already seen. It would only magnify the memory of the samurai, making him martyr and myth. Worse, the act might ignite unrest across their empire, where oppressed species already smoldered with quiet hatred. More unsettling was the dawning recognition that humanity was unlike other conquered peoples. Humans were not the strongest, nor the most technologically advanced, but they had a quality that did not fade under conquest. Their history was a litany of resilience, wars fought under impossible odds, empires toppled by smaller forces, revolutions sparked by ideals stronger than weapons. The samurai was not a solitary anomaly but a symbol of that heritage. Every culture on Earth had produced its own warriors, each with codes, traditions, and the same refusal to break. This was the thread connecting Spartans who stood at Thermopylae, guerrillas who fought invaders in forests, soldiers who endured trenches, and countless nameless fighters who would rather die than surrender. The warlords' arrogance faltered as they recognized the implication. Their empire relied on fear to maintain order. Yet here was a species that thrived under pressure, that transformed mockery into defiance. If the samurai represented the spirit of humanity, then Earth was not a fragile world waiting for conquest, but a spark capable of igniting wildfires across the stars. The more they considered, the clearer the danger became. To fight humans meant more than facing their weapons. It meant facing their history, their adaptability, their relentless will. No simulation could account for the variables of a species that learned from every failure and drew strength from every loss. The duel had proven that even when stripped of technology, humanity's core was unbreakable. Thus the laughter that had filled their halls only hours before dissolved into uneasy silence. What began as entertainment ended as revelation. Humanity could not be measured in the ways they understood. The samurai's blade had not only cut down a champion, it had pierced the illusion of invulnerability that sustained their rule. And in that wound, doubt began to bleed. The warlords withdrew their champion's body in silence, each one retreating into the safety of their councils with faces carved from stone. They had arrived expecting mockery, but they left burdened with a truth they could not erase. The samurai had done more than defeat an opponent. He had shattered the foundation of their arrogance. In their galaxy-spanning empire, fear was the mortar that bound their dominion together. Yet now billions of eyes had seen a human rise against impossible odds and prevail. That vision could not be undone. On Earth, the mood transformed from dread to fierce pride. The duel had never been about spectacle for humanity, it was survival. Yet in survival, something greater was born. The samurai's victory resonated not as the act of one man but as the embodiment of a species. His blade carried the weight of ancestors who had endured famine, plague, conquest, and still pressed forward. His armor represented not just tradition but the enduring principle that humanity would never submit quietly. For the first time, the galaxy saw humanity not as prey, but as equals in defiance. The warlords debated furiously. To unleash their fleets in retaliation risked more than blood, it risked legend. If they destroyed Earth, they would not bury the samurai's triumph, they would elevate it into myth that no empire could silence. Already whispers spread across conquered worlds. Species who had bowed their heads under oppression felt sparks of courage. The samurai had proven that power was not invulnerable, that the unlikeliest of opponents could cut through inevitability with enough resolve. To attempt annihilation now would only confirm the fear the warlords worked so hard to deny, that their reign was fragile. Reluctantly, they withdrew their immediate threats. Their ships loitered at the edges of Earth's orbit, but the promised firestorm never fell. The official declaration spoke of respect earned through trial, but the truth was simpler. For the first time in memory, the warlords had hesitated. They had seen something they could not quantify, a force that did not stem from biology or weaponry but from an inner defiance that multiplied rather than diminished under pressure. Humanity had shown them that true strength lay not in domination but in the refusal to be broken. The samurai himself returned without ceremony. He did not call himself hero, nor did he claim glory. His victory was not his alone, it belonged to the countless generations that shaped him, to the countless others who could have stood where he stood. His bow at the end of the duel was not to his opponents but to humanity itself, a silent acknowledgement of the unbroken spirit carried within the species. That gesture spread faster than the duel itself, becoming a symbol etched into broadcasts, whispered in the halls of rebellion, painted on the walls of occupied worlds. In the weeks that followed, Earth understood the significance. Technology alone could never define them. Other civilizations had machines far greater, weapons sharper, armor stronger. What humanity possessed was something rarer, the ability to fuse memory, tradition, and defiance into living will. The samurai was proof of that lineage, not as an ancient echo but as a present reality. He stood as the reminder that every culture on Earth had forged its own codes of endurance, that the species as a whole had been tempered by struggle since its first steps across stone. Beyond Earth, the galaxy whispered of this duel as if it were prophecy. Conquered peoples repeated the story, finding courage in its simplicity. Warlords who had once ruled through intimidation now feared the spread of that courage more than they feared armies. They recognized the danger of a species that had not yet reached its peak, a species that could stand in archaic armor with nothing but steel and still unnerve an empire. Humanity did not declare victory over the warlords. There was no proclamation of conquest, no boastful announcement of superiority. Instead, there was resolve, quiet and enduring. The lesson was clear: humanity had survived, and in survival, they had revealed themselves to be something the galaxy could not ignore. The warlords had sought to demonstrate weakness; instead, they exposed a truth far greater than themselves. The samurai's duel became the first entry in a new chapter of galactic history. Humanity had not conquered, but neither had it been conquered. It stood at the threshold of the stars with a reputation forged in discipline and spirit. The aliens had arrived to laugh, certain of their supremacy. They departed without words, carrying fear and respect in equal measure. And long after fleets withdrew, the memory remained. The stars now carried a story told in hushed tones and bold declarations alike, that humans, fragile in form yet indomitable in spirit, were not to be dismissed. That day, one man in armor had stood for all of Earth. His blade cut deeper than flesh, it cut into the certainty of empire. And in that silence, the galaxy understood what the warlords had refused to see: humanity was not prey. Humanity was the fire in the dark, and it would never be extinguished.